offered to be here today. You all know him as the author of Hopium Chronicles, and he has been a source of inspiration and guidance to hundreds of thousands of people throughout the community over the past 2 years. He's given us valuable information, and he's given us a path to many victories. He has been a loyal friend to grassroots organizations nationwide, but a special friend to Commit to Democracy. And today, he's returning to help us through this challenging time and help us see a path forward where we can build together a positive future for ourselves, our friends, and our families. And we welcome him today with all our heart. I turn it over.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Molly, and thanks to the whole team here at Commit to Democracy. In my journey through as a partner with the Democratic grassroots around the country, as you both remember, I think you were one of the 2 or 3 first groups that I spoke to back in the summer or fall of 2022 when I started, when my stuff kind of went viral and I became aware of the incredible grassroots army that had grown up around the country spontaneously, organically. And so it's been great to be in partnership with you all. And thank you for all your continued good work. I haven't done many talks since the election. I've done my Hopium talks, which are, with my community. But I haven't done as many of these as as I was doing. I mean, I've probably given 150 talks to grassroots groups since the summer of 2022. And let me try to share with you, my thoughts about where we are and how to think about what we're going to do together over the next couple of years. Starting with this, basic admonition that this is going to be very hard. And, things have changed and we're in a new day. And, it's been already pretty ugly and the guy's not in the White House yet. And so I think that one of the most important things is you have to prepare yourself emotionally, psychologically, physically to what's going to be a difficult couple of years. And, I'm dealing with it I've joined a gym, I'm working out much more, I'm taking care of myself better. I worked a little bit too hard, but I left it all on the playing field like many of us all did. And thank you all for all that you did for this last cycle. I mean, the Democratic grassroots did their job, right? We raised more money than we've ever raised before as a party. We had more volunteers than we've ever had. We made more voter contact than we've ever had before. Our family, the grassroots family, we did our job in this last election, and all of you should be very proud of it. I'm also deeply aware that everyone is reevaluating and trying to figure out how to once again rally the way that we've done before. And I don't think it's a given. I think there are going to be people who are going to be taking time off and, needing to disengage and for a variety of reasons. And I think, we've got time to sort of build back the army that we've had. It's not going to come back right away. And we have a lot of work to do to convince people that their time and money is worth it. And I think this is something we all have to be really honest about. I've interviewed at Hopium 3 of the leading candidates for chair, Ben Wickler, Ken Martin, and yesterday, Martin O'Malley. And Martin O'Malley, in the interview I released this morning, did a really good job at talking about regaining trust, with our family and inside the grassroots. And I think that I was impressed with the way that he spoke about it. And I think it's going to be whoever the next chair is, it's going to be a big job. And so first of all, this is going to be a tough period, and you need to take care of yourself. We need to be supportive of one another. And I also think just a general admonition that I have about the path forward is that it's going to be really easy to, I'm going to come back to that in a second. I haven't given many of these talks, so just bear with me as I stumble through my notes here. Second big point is that we do pulling back out, right? We had since MAGA became a thing, which was really in 2017, because I don't know that we really knew what kind of president Trump was going to be in 2016. Some people did, but we didn't know, and he didn't know. But he became MAGA. He ripped off his jacket and we saw the MAGA underneath, right, in 2017. We've done really well in elections. We had a really good election in 2018. We won in 2020. We had a better election than anybody anticipated in 2022. We had a really good election in 2023. And then in 2024, even though Kamala didn't win, right, we won these Senate races in many of the same battlegrounds. We did remarkably well down ballot in North Carolina. We had a lot of down ballot wins below the presidential level. And even though that's still a tragedy, we only lost the national election by a point and a half. It's something like 115,000 votes in 3 states. If they had switched, she would have won. In the House races, right, it's a couple thousand votes that made the difference between us being in the majority and the minority. Our road back is not as steep and as treacherous as it feels right now, objectively. Um, and it's important to recognize that after Bush won in 2004, where he was the last time Republicans won the popular vote and the electoral college vote, in the 2006 midterms, we had a blowout midterm for us. In 2018, against Trump in his first midterm, we had a blowout midterm. We won by 8.5 points in 2018. So, history tells us that it's likely that if we do the work and everyone does their job, that we could have a good midterm and we could start to claw our way back in 2026. That feels very distant now. And I don't want to oversell this, but it's also just I don't think we're as far away electorally as it feels right now in terms of regaining the initiative. The second thing is Trump, we haven't had a lot of polling since the election. And we also, one thing I will say about the election polling, because I'm sure this will come up in the questions, is that I want everyone to remember that going into that final weekend, every forecaster had Harris winning, right? Everybody did, all of them, right? Nate Silver, 538, by small margins, but all the forecasters tipped. And so the polls weren't really all that far off, because Trump only won by a point and a half. Everyone said it was, including me, right, that it was going to be a close election. I thought it was more likely that she was going to win than not. But that's what all the forecasters said going into the final weekend of the election, right, because of the way the polling had broken in the last couple of weeks. So things were very close, and it's heartbreaking and tragic what's happened. But again, this was not a blowout win for Trump. This wasn't, a 15, 10-point win. This was a point and a half. And if we hadn't had large drop off of Democratic voters in states like California and Illinois and New York, we probably would have won the popular vote. And that's something we can talk about in the discussion. First real poll out in some time today, NPR Marist, which is considered a very, credible, serious poll. Trump is at 44-49 in his faves and unfaves, as it's called, favorability. He's underwater, and on issues like tariffs and mass deportation, his numbers are not good. And what the pollsters, and you can find this right up on the NPR website, the pollsters argue that Trump is coming in to his inaugural in some of the worst conditions that any recent president has been. He's already in a diminished place. And if you read Hopium, you know that what I've been arguing is that Trump 2.0 is off to a very, very wobbly start, right? They had that complete fiasco around the continuing resolution. It looks like Elon Musk has veto power over some of his policies, making him look weak as opposed to strong. He's gone on these wild tirades about taking lands away from other countries. I mean, I think that he's come out of the box looking wobbly and weak and wild. And some of his appointments, I think, are reinforcing that. And so I don't think the Trump that we've seen over the last few weeks is a scary Trump to me, a powerful Trump. He is the same guy that we saw, right? He's going to be president, but he's still a rapist, a traitor, a fraudster, and a felon. He's still this extreme, diminished and extreme and kind of unstable guy. And he's mercurial. And the other thing, though, that matters here is because reality does matter, truth does matter, is that his wild agenda has already started causing interest rates to rise here in the United States and around the world. And costs have gone up because of Donald Trump already, and he's not even president. So, on the core promise that he made, which is he was going to lower costs, the things that arguably won him the election, he's already betrayed a central promise. And I think that we're going to have stuff to work with, what I'm saying, in opposing and challenging him in the coming months. Third, the challenge we have now is we're moving from a governing party to an opposition party. And we're going to have to learn how to be an opposition party. I don't, you know, um, the on Monday, the person and the team that's been responsible for carrying the messaging load and the big arguments against Trump and MAGA, Joe Biden and his team, the $2.5 billion in the campaign and the daily communications from the White House are going to be gone. And that burden is going to fall to Schumer and to Hakeem Jeffries. Um, and it means that, you know, for all of us feeling that we got outgunned and outmatched in the media, the day-to-day media scrum, you know, we're going to have a lot less than we had, and they're going to have a lot more than they had. And so this information superiority that I talk about is going to become worse for us in next week. And I think we have to recognize that Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, Leader Jeffries, have been operating as essentially wingmen to Biden, right? That Biden and his team set the tone, set the agenda, and now this is going to fall to them. And it is a huge burden against the power of the right wing noise machine, and Trump's just general capacity to dominate the daily discourse, right? Which is his, you know, greatest political strength. And what it means is that we have to help them, and we together have to help each other learn how to become an effective, or what I call ferocious opposition. And it's not going to happen overnight. A switch is not going to be flipped, and all of a sudden, all of us are going to feel like this is a well-oiled machine. I think that we have to recognize that even just in the way that the Senate Democrats are handling the challenging of the nominees this week, it's not like they've reached out to all the Democratic grassroots groups all around the country, and they've reached out to Midas Touch and Hopium and all these new tools that we have. Because what's happened is that since the last time we didn't have a president, our family has changed a lot, right? All the groups like yours have grown up, and we have millions of more people who gave money and volunteered than before. We have this new burgeoning, you know, pro-democracy media ecosystem of Midas Touch and Courier Newsroom, Resolute Square, Hopium Chronicles, Tim Snyder on Substack, Heather Cox Richardson, right? All these folks. So the team, our family, is more muscular and stronger than it was, but it's also new, and we're going to all have to figure out how to work together in this new opposition that we all have to build together. And what I was going to say earlier, and what I want to say, is that I think that people have to be my advice to you, right? And for both in terms of efficacy and also staying sane in the coming months, is to not position yourself as somebody who's perpetually disappointed, and to recognize that no one really knows what to do now, but we have to reinvent, reimagine, and build new things together, as you guys have done here with your own organization, right? And that there are going to be people along the way that are going to disappoint you. There are going to be people that you feel, whether in California or in other states, right, wherever you are, that sort of veered off course. And you're going to be, and my advice and counsel is to be forgiving about that, because we are all panicked and scared. And even senators and congressmen are, right, about what's going to happen here. We're all in a new, dazed and confused moment, and people are going to make mistakes. And if we turn on each other and if we spend our energy attacking one another, we guarantee failure. It's a guarantee of us losing. And we have to take the limited capacities that we have and keep them focused on where they need to go, which is exposing their extremism and building up the good things that we are doing. And we have to be disciplined. And I think this, you know, impulse to want to cast out or to attack, I'm disappointed in what John Fetterman's doing right now, Senator Fetterman's doing. I'm disappointed with others. I'm not spending my time on that. I'm spending my time on doing things that I feel are more constructive in order to move the ball down the playing field. And my advice to you is to try to be disciplined about not descending into factionalism. Factionalism is how they build a majority for the next 25 years, right? Is that if we split and if we divide and if we falter and if we attack one another, if we become factious, and we have to really work hard to prevent that from happening. It doesn't mean we can't debate and have discussions, but there's a difference between that and us falling apart and us splitting and falling into faction and fracturing. Finally, I think that one of the things that I'm learning at Hopium about what we call doing more and worrying less, although I don't know it's going to be possible to worry less in the next couple of years, is we may have to just do more in that, is this idea of taking some of this capacity that we have and turning it into a lobbying force or a force. I talk about at Hopium that we want to be proud patriots and info warriors, but maybe we also want to be big citizens now too. And what I mean by that is I've been asking my community to fight against what I call the unacceptable four, which is Gabbard and Hegseth and Kennedy and Patel. And people have been making calls every day, calling their or when they can, senators and House members. And people have gotten have felt this is a constructive activity, that calling your representatives, letting them know how you feel, weighing in. And I can tell you that in Washington, these congressional and Senate offices take these calls really seriously. They actually really tally them every day. And what happens is senators and congressmen will talk to each other and say, how are the calls going in your office? Are people concerned about this? And what we have to do, I think, is, if 6 million people gave to the Democratic Party and our candidates in this last cycle, and I think that's what the number is. It used to be around 4 million, but I think it jumped up. Imagine if we could get 500,000 people or 1 million people committing to working their representatives in all 50 states, red states, red reps and blue reps, right? In order to create an understanding that part of our job is that if they don't hear from us, then that absence becomes significant. If today the Republicans go back to their offices and they hear that they got a lot of calls that were negative on Hegseth, that's going to affect their understanding of what they do. It may not change their vote, but it will create hesitancy. If they don't hear from their constituents, then it's a green light for them to proceed. And so I think that in both at a federal level and even in the states that you live in California, creating now a new culture where we're calling our reps and letting them know how we feel. Calling is better than writing. By the way, there's no question that the calls matter more to these offices because it's a more significant engagement, right? You're taking more of your time to do so. That this may be a new activity as part of the Democratic grassroots, is sort of this idea that in a year where we don't have a lot of elections coming up, right? This is not going to be a super busy year. There will be elections in New Jersey and in Virginia and a few and some mayoralties and others, but we don't have a huge electoral calendar this year. And so what are we going to do, right? And we have to keep doing because that's what our democracy requires, and it's also, I think, what it's going to be required for our sanity, right? I mean, I really do believe in this Hopium mantra of doing more and worrying less, which is I started Hopium because I wanted to channel all the worry and the fear and the frustration, the anger, the optimism that I had into a place where I felt I was channeling this into the most constructive means I could possibly have. And so then finally, I just want to say that I think that one of our biggest and most important jobs is to think of ourselves every day as pulling the curtain back from the Trumpian wizard, right? Think of Donald Trump as the Wizard of Oz. And we have to pull the curtain back and show the world that old man every day. It is critical that we not let his madness become our own and that we stay grounded in truth and in optimism and in hope and love of country and patriotism and that we don't allow their madness, their craziness, to become our own, to become the way that we understand the world, right? This is a politics that is corrosive and destructive and is going to do enormous harm to the country, right? We just have to understand that. But part of our job is to not obey in advance. It's not to make Trump more powerful than he is. He's got to earn it every day. And the truth is, the guy is far more likely to fuck this thing up in the next 6 months and 12 months than he is to succeed. But part of that perception of whether he screws it up or succeeds is up to us, right? Because if we're always saying, well, if we're scared and intimidated, as opposed to, making sure that we're telling people the sky is blue and the sky isn't red, whatever the analogy is, this notion of constantly understanding him as weak and not strong is critical to this next stage. We must take the wins when they come. Donald Trump sees the world as winning and losing. It's how his orientation is. When he lost that vote a few weeks ago, that was humiliating for him in Congress when his own members stood him up and voted against his bill, that continuing resolution. So when we have wins, we have to take them, celebrate them, build on them, right? Because we're going to have more losses than wins in the next 6 to 9 months. But this concept of strength and winning and weakness and losing is as important a way to understand what's about to happen as any of the issues that we're going to be debating, right? In our family, we're very issue oriented, right? We think about what's going to happen with the economy and fiscal matters and reproductive freedom and all the issues, climate change. Donald Trump sees the world as strong and weak and winning and losing. And we have to understand that in order to defeat him. And I think, frankly, I'm going to say this because I'm going to talk more freely about the campaign as we get further and further away, as the pain of the loss dissipates a little bit. But the campaign, I think, didn't understand this about Trump. They didn't understand how central he sees strength and weakness, winning, losing, as the entire it's his entire orientation to politics, right? And so, it's why when we have wins, they really matter, and we can't dismiss them. We have to celebrate them and build on them to then go get more wins later. It's a different way of viewing, I think, things as in our politics. That's my best set of thoughts, Linda and Molly, about us, how we now have to change, and in order for us to win and prosper in what's going to be a new and challenging time. I'm not being Pollyannish. I mean, I think this is going to be really hard. I have to write a newsletter every day that goes to 170,000 people. And I'm very conscious when I get up in the morning now that if I spend my newsletter every day talking about his ugliness, no one's going to want to read that, right? And so I in my own deep understanding, sitting in this room, I've spoken to many of you before. I'm going to admit to you, I'm dreading what's about to happen. And I don't, there are days when I want to do anything but other than sit down and write about everything that's happening and comment on what's happening because it's so ugly. However, disengaging is not really an option because then they win. And I know that it's easy to say that, but emotionally, we have to get to a place, and all of you have to get to your own place where you're engaged in ways that feel comfortable and healthy for you, not disengaging. But that doesn't mean you do what you did 2 years ago or a year ago. But checking out altogether is how they win. And so we're going to have to figure out together how to be a healthy, successful opposition and continue to work to sort of soften the edges of this extreme politics. And that when they stumble, we have to pounce on it to explain to the American people that they made a mistake in electing these guys. Because the thing that will start to put a break on their um, boyish, juvenile, adolescent kind of boosterism is if their polling numbers start going down the tubes. That still matters in the city, in Washington. And right now, they're starting in a very, very low place. So if they stumble on the debt ceiling, if they can't get a budget passed in the next few weeks, if Trump, if something bad happens internationally, right? These things the reality still matters here, right? And we can't lose, we have to keep in our minds and distinguish between what is true and what people believe. And we have to stay grounded in truth at every step of the way forward. And I think that we have to hold hands together and be, present with one another. And we have to go fight as hard as we possibly can, whatever that means for you. I'm going to stick with hopium. I'm going to be working 6 days a week, as I've been doing for the last couple of years, because I know the moment requires it, and because our community has become powerful, And this has become an important place for many people to go hang out to do this work. And I look forward to being continued in partnership with all of you. So, Linda and Molly, thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I don't know if that was as hope-filled and optimistic as some of my recent appearances to you, but it's also where we are.
Well, I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for myself. I feel better hearing you, knowing that we're on the right track. Uh, there's still more good than bad in this world and in our communities. So thank you, Simon. That was really quite helpful. I will tell you there are a load of questions
Let's
coming
go.
in
Let's go.
into chat. So I'm going to turn it over to Molly, who's going to moderate, and I'll support her as needed. So we hope we get to all your questions. I also just wanted to point out, I'm not sure we told you, we put you on mute so that we can have a better experience as a group. But thank you for putting all of your wonderful questions in the chat. Molly?
Okay, thank you so much, Simon. So the first couple questions is about us being an opposition party. And so I know that out on Blue Sky, Timothy Snyder floated this idea of a people's cabinet.
Yeah.
And we were wondering, Linda was wondering what you think about that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked a little bit about this. First of all, it's a great idea, and I consider myself a student of Timothy Snyder. And for those of you who are Hopium readers, he gave me a shout out the other day on Blue Sky, and it was like a big day for me, in the nerdy world that we all live in, right? And because Ezra Klein, anyway, I can get into it later. I think two things about it. I think it's necessary, but not sufficient. I mean, what I'm really talking about in becoming an opposition party is 6 million of us going to work together, and us reimagining the war room so that it's not 20 sweaty kids drinking Red Bulls producing TikTok videos or whatever it's going to be if TikTok goes away, but it's us creating a national community of people who give a shit, who are going to be connected to Schumer and Jeffries and to each other, and that we stay engaged and present and we fight. And that it also includes all the groups like Commit to Democracy and many of the traditional Democratic and center left groups that we've all worked with, and includes this new ecosystem. And so I think that how the Senate and House organize themselves in opposition, everyone should realize that there is a ranking member of every committee already. I mean, there are already people in Washington who think they have this job, right? And so the idea that there could be a um, sort of a single person taking the lead is a little bit at odds with the way our system works, to be honest, right? It doesn't mean it doesn't happen or it doesn't happen in some other form. But I think the ranking members on these committees all think that that's their job, sort of. And what I want to say about that is that what I have been arguing at Hopium is that one of the ways that we have to become the opposition party, and it's what Timothy Snyder is referring to, is that we're not going to be able to pass a lot of legislation or any legislation for the next 2 years. So what are these guys going to do in Congress all day long? And they need to reimagine their role as influencers and information warriors and not just as legislators. They have to see themselves as communicators and not just as people that govern. And that we have to do politics 24/7, 365, and not just during election time. And that we have to really reimagine how we communicate in a very different information environment. And I think that, what to me, if you think about this, if you were sitting down drawing a battle plan for our family in the daily information war, we have tens of thousands of Democratic elected officials all across the country. We should be demanding that they are loud and present every single day, all of them, every day, using these platforms that they have, both in terms of the elected side and the political side, and not view it as their job is to issue press releases that nobody reads anymore, right? And there's going to have to be a rethink. Republicans get up every morning trying to figure out how they can get on Fox News and reach, millions of people, through statements they make, and they're auditioning all, between 8 a.m. and 2 o'clock, everyone's auditioning to get on Hannity every day. Our electeds have to take greater responsibility. And one of the examples I will give you is that Eric Swalwell, California member, I think is an exemplar. I'm interviewing him next week. We're having a long discussion about this, about how does he see himself as a communicator and an information warrior. So when you're lobbying these offices for them, I had at Hopium, people were saying, why are we calling House offices about people who are going to vote in the Senate? Well, if you can have an opinion about Hegseth not being unacceptable, then so can a House member, right? And we have to help them understand how to act now in opposition, in a noisy, ferocious opposition. And we should be insisting, demanding that we hear from them. I mean, one of the ideas that a fellow Northern California came up with on Hopium, Laura, yesterday in the chat was she's now asking them to start posting on Blue Sky. And when she makes her calls to the offices, she's like, "Why aren't you on Blue Sky? You need to get on Blue Sky," right? So there are ways that you can insist, not demand, right? We're all in the same family, right? We're all in the same happy dysfunctional family as Democrats, that we have to insist in new behaviors in order, or, if we want to win, right? If we just want to try really hard, that's one thing. And I think one of the tests for us as an opposition is going to be, how bad do we really want it, everybody? And one of the things that I was very disappointed about from the campaign and their story about what happened in the election was, in essence, their story was, we tried really hard. We did our best. Well, fuck that. Like, we don't have an option to try really hard and do our best. We only have one option, which is we have to win, right? And, for our future, our families, for our democracy, our freedoms, right? Which is why Merrick Garland should be living in infamy now, because he failed in his fundamental job to protect the country. And so I think that what we have to do now in opposition is it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be hard. People are going to yell at us. They're going to attack us on social media. People are going to attack people on Fox News, right? But we have way too many politicians in our system who are ducking every day. And we got to pull them out of their slumber and get them out there fighting, every one of them, right? Being, and that's where I have been, very aggressive with my friends here in Washington. And I'm going to try to be a teacher leader in this regard, because it's what I do every day, right? Like I'm out here, Molly, right? Yelling and screaming and posting and commenting every day, right? But every senator and House member can do that. What else are they going to do? They're not going to pass any legislation, right? So they got to get off their asses and get out there and be loud and go out there and take them on and not put up with their bullshit. And I think you saw a combativeness. I didn't watch the hearings today. I haven't had time, but yesterday against Hegseth, I mean, I liked the tone. I liked the way they were engaging. I think they roughed up Pam Bondi today. It's not going to be enough to knock them out. But again, think of this moment as us old dogs learning new tricks, right? Like, we have to go learn how to do this together and be supportive of one another, and learn a new ways, and get better and improve and fight every day and keep getting better and stronger. And I think that part of the role that you have is that you can be insisting, when you have meetings with members of Congress or local legislators or local mayors, right? You should ask them, what are you doing? Because here's what's going to happen in California, right? For those of you who live in California, the rebuilding of LA is going to be one of the most titanic ideological fights of our time. And, it is going to be, it's going to go on for years. And Republicans are going to make it really hard. And, we're going to have to, this is going to be an extraordinary fight. There's already senators today were on Fox News saying that as a condition for funding in California, that they're going to ask California to start rolling back environmental protections, right? So, like, this is, all of you who live in California may have a real opportunity pretty soon to be involved in what may be one of the most consequential debates about climate change. about how we live together in urban areas, the role of mass transit and density in water and all these things that are going to be part of this, that getting LA ready for the Olympics in 2028. All of a sudden, this is going to be an incredible, I think, front line in the ideological war that we're going to be in with MAGA. And all of you who live in California are going to have a role to play in that.
Okay, thank you so much, Simon. We have a couple questions on the DNC chair.
Yep.
And so one is Martin O'Malley has been impressing some people. Susan Pfeiffer put this in the chat.
Yep.
Do you think he has a chance? Katie asked, will you be interviewing Jason Paul for the DNC chair? And somebody also asked, can't the DNC chair be a powerful voice, just like Jeffries and Schumer?
Yeah, great questions. I think the race is wide open right now. And I ran for chair 20 years ago against Howard Dean. I lost by one vote in the final weekend. I was one vote away from being national chairman 20 years ago. So I went through this process 20 years ago. So it's an arcane process. There are 448, I think, people who vote. You need 250 to win. Most of the votes come from the states, and most of the votes in the states come from non-battleground states, right? So, think of and so um, we've got, I think there are three leading candidates right now, and then some second-tier candidates who may or may not grow over time. There isn't much time, right? The vote is in 2 weeks. It's on February 1st, but I think Martin O'Malley, I think right now, my understanding in terms of the most, if I could say that Ken Martin has by far and away the most public endorsements so far of DNC members who are voting. And then O'Malley and Ben Wickler have much fewer. But I think if there isn't a majority in the first ballot, it goes to an open process, and anything can happen at that point. And I think at this point, I don't know that anybody gets to a majority in the first ballot. There is a forum tomorrow that all of you, if you want to watch, it's going to be on the political website and also on the DNC website, or the DNC YouTube channel. And I think it's an open race, and I think the candidates are putting out ideas. I wish there was a little bit more time, frankly, in order to have more spirited debates. Jason Paul, for example, said some important things about Democratic fundraising, which I largely agree with, so that us start to have a conversation about all these terrible emails that we receive from everybody telling us that the sky is falling and everything is bad and we're losing. I think this is a depressant in the family, and it's something we've got to air out. It's unacceptable. I think we need to treat our 6 million supporters as partners in the fight and not donors to the cause. And this is something literally I campaigned on 20 years ago in the chair's race, and because we had just gone through the Dean campaign, the early stages of the grassroots revolution, the Democratic Party. And so I'm neutral. I'm staying neutral. I feel in my community, my job was to sort of inform. For those of you if you come to my Hopium site, you can watch interviews with Ben Wickler and Ken Martin and now Martin O'Malley. The Martin O'Malley one came out today. And also I have interviews with Jane Klebb, the Nebraska Democratic chair, and Anderson Clayton, the North Carolina Democratic chair. If you want to sort of do a deep dive on the DNC, if this is of interest to you, there's a lot of good interviews there that I've done with folks for your knowledge. I have no idea what's going to happen. And I do think, though, that Ken Martin is the least known, but because he's been a very successful chair in Minnesota. First of all, I'll say of the three leading candidates, all of them will be good, whoever it is. They're all will do a good job. I will say this about the spokesperson. I don't think the chair needs to be a spokesperson. I think the chair needs to be the conductor of the orchestra. We have lots of great spokespeople, right? Josh Shapiro and Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris and make your long list of people, right? Maxwell Frost and AOC. I mean, whatever your big tent list is, we've got 20, 30, 40 really powerful spokespeople for the party. It's more important that the DNC chair give them opportunities to engage and speak at a national level and to be the conductor of the orchestra, in my view. They don't have to play. The chair doesn't need to be a powerful spokesperson. I mean, how many of you ever really saw Ronna Romney McDaniel on television, right? I mean, she was never on TV. And so there is a model for chairs of them being there to promote the elected officials, not to promote themselves in the party. And I think that if it's Ben Wickler or Ken Martin, who are, let's just say less, Martin O'Malley, been governor of, two-term governor of Maryland, mayor of Baltimore. He's a highly accomplished politician. He's an incredibly powerful speaker. He will be a spokesperson. Will Ken and Ben, do they need to be spokespeople on TV to be successful? I don't think so. I don't think they need to be. I don't think that's a requirement for the job. I think what's a requirement for the job, in my view, is that I think of all the things you should be looking for, is that there are a lot of interesting people running. But if you don't have extensive experience at beating Republicans in general elections, then you shouldn't be chairman of the Democratic Party. I mean, it is, if there's one trait and one skill that you just simply have to have, if there's a threshold criteria, if you haven't been in elections running against Republicans, not against other Democrats, against Republicans, and winning against Republicans, which is all that the DNC and the Democratic Party really does in the family, right? That's their job, which is to beat Republicans. If you don't have experience in doing that, you shouldn't be DNC chair. And and I just will tell you that that to me is kind of a threshold credential that you need. Martin O'Malley has it. Ken Martin has it. Ben Wickler has it, right? Some of these other folks running don't. And so I think that that's to me kind of the one given. When I ran 20 years ago, I had run NDN, the organization I ran. All we did was endorse candidates in swing districts that we didn't know if we were going to win and lose. I spent 10 years working in the most critical battleground Senate races and House races in the country, endorsing candidates, helping them with message, right? Doing polling and all the stuff that we did to support us in these battleground places. I had a rationale to say, I know what it takes to win in tough places, right? And that's part of the reason I ran. And so I do think that to me, that's kind of a threshold that you should use as a way of evaluating any of these candidates. There's a young guy running as in a state Senate candidate in New York, but he's won a single state Senate district, right? In New York. To me, that's insufficient to run the national party. But I like the fact that we're seeing new voices emerge and people emerging and getting out there and mixing it up. I think that's really healthy and good.
Okay, so one final question, and I know we have a lot of questions in the chat and we don't have time for them all. But we will send them to you, and maybe you can
Sure.
write about some of them in your newsletter. But one major question, I think, from Barb Mecca. So there's a lot going on. You mentioned LA, we've got Biden's ceasefire, we've got the economy, we've got the ACA. We have a lot of stuff that we have that we could lose. Do you think there's going to be major resistance in Congress to MAGA? And will any of it be among the GOP? Because they have a lot to lose too.
I had a really interesting conversation. Who did I talk to about this yesterday? About I'm forgetting who I had this conversation with, but I did a talk last night with Stuart Stevens for Resolute Square. And Stuart Stevens, for those of you who don't know who Stuart Stevens is, Stuart Stevens was the most accomplished Republican media consultant in the country 20 years ago, right? I won't say he was their James Carville because there is nobody like James Carville, right? But he, ran Bush's reelect in 2004, got senators elected all over the country. The guy and Stuart Stevens, when I was growing up in politics, right, was like the most dangerous and effective guy on their side, right? The guy that, was really good at his job. And he's now on our team, right? It's unimaginable, right? What's happened, how there isn't a Republican Party anymore. And that the party of Reagan, the party of Lincoln, the party that came before California, many of you have friends who are California Republicans who are liberal on social issues and conservative on fiscal issues. And um, the Republican Party, as we know it, no longer exists after this election. And people like Liz Cheney and Stuart Stevens and Joe Scarborough, right? They're not going to go back ever to the Republican Party, in my view. I mean, Liz Cheney has said publicly that there's going to have to be a new center-right party built. That in essence, what's happened is that there's been a capture of the Republican Party by this MAGA ideology, which, as I wrote about today, is, I think, a fascist political movement, right? I think that I've been very slow to use that word, but I think that we are now at a point where Trump meets all the criteria of a fascist and an ideological. Pete Hegseth yesterday sort of cemented it to me. The guy's a fire breathing fucking fascist, right? Like, and there's no alternative, right? He was comfortable with using the military to shoot American civilians. He's comfortable, ignoring the Geneva Conventions, right? You go through all this stuff. I mean, this is something what I wrote about today is that I think we have to view MAGA as a secession movement. It's not seceding geographically the way that the Civil War happened. It's seceding from a rules-based order internationally and rule of law here in the United States. MAGA rejects rules and laws and norms and conventions. It doesn't believe in democracy. We know that because they led an insurrection against our democracy 4 years ago, right? And so I think that part of what I want to say is that we have to recognize now that there is no other ideology in the Republican Party other than MAGA anymore. It doesn't exist. There isn't a moderate Republican. There's one ideology. And so, as Bill Kristol wrote today, another guy who I never thought I'd be on the same team with him, right? Or on the same team with Liz and Dick Cheney. I think we have to process and understand how much these words like left and right, Republican and Democrat, are ceding to a new set of political arrangements. When I founded Hopium 2 years ago, what I talked about was that we were entering a new political age. And what I said is that this new political age that, Clinton, I was part of the Clinton world and the campaign in 92. I was in the war room with Carville and Stephanopoulos. I worked there. And this is now dinosaur times, right? In our politics, the olden days. And by the way, it's my dog barking. I apologize. But just on this ramble, to conclude on this ramble, I started Hopium 2 years ago because I felt that the world that was built by Clinton, the new Democrat world, which was essentially built to deal with the end of the Cold War and to build a politics around a post-Cold War era, that era had come to an end, that we were entering now the post-Cold War era, right? It is amazing that the post-Cold War era never had a name. It's just called the post-Cold War era, even though it's been around since 1989. And we're now I felt like we were entering a new age and that it was going to be defined by a new set of challenges and where what we were trying to do in the Clinton era was to build a world where we extended the American project to the whole world, right after the fall of communism, where the unaligned nations and the communist nations came together in a single global project and a global economy and a set of global politics that were based on American values of freedom and opportunity and a rules-based order, right? That was a big project to extend it out. We could debate about whether it worked or not, but that now we're entering, I think, a new age where the big project as Democrats and people in the center left is that we have two existential challenges now, which is we have to make sure the planet doesn't warm and we have to make sure that democracy prevails. And that's, in my view, that we're going to have to build a new politics around those two things that don't really exist. The campaign, the 2024 Harris campaign, never talked about climate change, right? And we are still not where we need to be. And I think what I'll leave you all with, as having been through these periods of when we've been down, is what's exciting about what's coming next. And I should start with this in my talks from now on, so that it isn't so hard scrapple in my message. What's exciting about what's coming now is we get to go build a new thing, right? This next Democratic Party, this next center left, this next pro-democracy movement needs to be built. It doesn't exist. We have to go build it together. And your organization and the various grassroots organizations around the country that I've spoken to, you're all playing a big role in that because you've already built new things. You're innovators, you're entrepreneurs creating new ways of being in community to advance our democracy. And I think that there is no going back now, right? We have to go forward and we have to go build this next thing. And periods of building and reinvention and reimagination are actually exciting, right? We get to try new things. We get to learn new ways. We get to build, promote new leaders. For those of you in California, innovating and building new things is kind of what you do, right? In California, right? And we need to do that now. We need to have a spirit of risk-taking entrepreneurship, of confidence in the future, not being scared and intimidated. I went through this period of rebuilding in 2004 through 2008, of which helped create Obama when we imagined a new coalition. We learned how to use new tools to speak to the new voters that we were reaching. We made new arguments about where we needed to go as a country. And what gives me hope is a good way to close here, Linda and Molly, is that I do think this next set of leaders that we have are extraordinary. And I think the party, in many ways, is stronger today at a leadership level than it's been. Carville and I was on Carville's podcast a few months ago, and we talked about how this next generation of leaders are the strongest that we've ever had. Just look at California, right? I mean, Kamala and Gavin Newsom and Adam Schiff now is going to emerge as a really powerful national. He already has, but he made incredible contributions. Alex Padilla, by the way, who I love and who I know and I've known a long time, who I feel has been a little bit quiet as a senator, was really like mixing it up today, right? I mean, it was great to see him out there. He's like was kicking ass today. And I think that new people are going to emerge and new institutions so view this next moment as, as a moment where new things are going to happen. And part of our job is to encourage that and be open to that. Be seeking the new leaders, the new ideas, the new institutions, the new tactics. This idea of us now creating a lobbying corps of 1 million people who are calling their congressmen, their senators every day, right? Giving feedback on legislation. These are all things now that we have to be open to, and so I want to end by saying that, this is going to be really hard. But we need to stay in the game and we need to fight. And how you choose to do that, your big job is to figure out how you do that and stay sane and stay safe and stay healthy, right? Because I think healthy, I joined a gym, and even though we have a gym here in our house, and I joined a gym and I have a trainer, which I haven't done in like 30 years. And I'm doing it because I want to get physically stronger in order to manage what's about to happen. Like literally, I feel that my body has to get stronger for me to be able to manage what's about to happen. And so I have a plan, right, of how I'm managing this period and how I'm contributing. All of you have to come up with your own plan. And that's part of the reason, this organization's here. And I'm really, again, want to conclude by saying thank you all for being here today and for all that you do for our country. And obviously our work is not finished. We have a lot of work to do, but I'm grateful to be in community with all of you. And Linda and Molly, you're never shy about asking me to come back. And in fact, I'll be coming back in March. By the way, I will say for all of you, I've never spoken with Heather Cox Richardson at an event before. This will be the first time. She's one of my absolute heroes. And so I'm really I have this is really important to me. So all of you have to show up for that event in March whenever we get it scheduled. So thanks everybody so much. Turn it back to the team that runs this great organization. Linda, you're on mute.
Sorry, thought I took myself off. Thank you, Simon. Thank you for staying steady. And thank you for continuing your work. We really value what you do, and you make us better than we can be. On a personal note, we will always be forever grateful to you, Simon. But on a personal note, I couldn't back myself out of a parking lot today. I was so stressed out. And now I feel uplifted. I hope you all feel that too. I feel like we can do this together. We just need to, like you said, we need to pace ourselves. We need to take time to breathe, and we need to stay in community. So Simon, you are our hero. You know that. Thank you so much for staying in our lives. And we'll be seeing you in March, if not before, but we'll be following you on Substack. And thank you so much. We'll send you all the questions you didn't get to today so that maybe you can incorporate or weave them into some of your daily writings or some of your video streaming that you do. We appreciate you beyond measure. For the rest